As you can see, my name is Mark. I'm the academic manager for EF Corporate Learning, and it's my great pleasure this afternoon to deliver the third webinar in the series, and this one is about freelance teaching. If you have questions, comments, please pop them in the chat. If I'm not able to answer them during this webinar, I'll do my best to get back to you later. So, this is what we'll try and cover today. The difference between being freelance and being employed. Tips about applications and interviews if you are applying to different companies. Some suggestions for building a personal brand. And our advice about the best setup for teaching online, if that's what you're doing. Plenty of time for questions as well. Like I say, maybe don't shout out, just pop them in the chat. So, before we start, why should you listen to me? Well, here's a very short introduction. So, you may recognize from my voice, I'm not from Switzerland, even though I live in Switzerland. I'm from England. I'm from a small town on the south coast of England called Bournemouth. You can see a beautiful picture of a beach. That's my hometown. That's where I started teaching in 1996. I know, I don't look old enough, but I've got approximately 30 years of experience I would love to share with you guys this afternoon. No surprises at the snowy mountains in the middle of where I live now, Switzerland. I'm also been lucky enough to teach in Milan for several years, in Porto in Portugal, and my first EF teaching job was at EF in Moscow. I've been a teacher, a director of studies, a university lecturer. When I first came to Switzerland about 7 years ago, I joined EF Corporate as a recruitment manager. So I've done hundreds, if not thousands, of teacher interviews and seen more CVs and resumes than I care to remember. So happy to share some of that experience with you today. During that time, I worked employed, member of staff, freelance, working for one school, working for lots. So hopefully some tips I can pass on. But please remember, this is only my opinion and you do not have to agree. So let's have a look at some of the differences between being freelance and being employed. So we've got pink and blue. Pink for a girl and blue for a boy, we say in England, but that's not why I chose these colors. Some of these, I think, refer perhaps more to freelance and some to being employed. What do you think? Which color is which? Hopefully not too difficult. Let's have a look. So, freelance teachers in the pink, employed teachers in the blue. Let's look at that top line. So, if you're employed, for example, I'm employed by EF, this is my full-time job. I only work here, I don't work anywhere else. I only work for one organization. And notice I use the word work. Whereas for freelance, it's perhaps more appropriate to use the word collaborate. That freelance is about doing different projects with different organizations. If you are, for example, a mechanic, you don't only fix one person's car. If you are a plumber, you don't only fix one person's bathroom. You would hopefully collaborate on different projects with different people all the time. And so a key difference between being employed and being freelance is the number of organizations that you're involved with. Freelance teachers, very often for legal reasons, to distinguish themselves from an employed teacher, must collaborate with more than one organization. Also makes good sense because if one organization has more lessons, more teaching hours, is paying more, you give yourself more options. So difference number one, being with various clients, various providers, or only working for one organization. Thinking about pay, a freelance teacher has an opportunity to negotiate their rate, and we'll touch on this a little later as well. Usually you're hourly paid and only hourly paid for the hours that you teach. So any admin or non-teaching hours are usually uncompensated. Whereas if you're employed, you would usually get a set amount, and then it doesn't depend on how many hours you teach, the amount of money you get, that's always the same. And you might also get things like holiday pay or sick pay as well. However, you might not get any more. So if you teach 5 hours or 20 hours, you'll probably get the same amount of money. Whereas a freelance teacher, if you teach 10 hours, you get a certain amount of money. If you teach double that, if you teach 20, you're going to get double the money. Also connected to the money that you receive is if you're employed, your company will probably do all the payroll and the tax for you. And so you'll get money into your bank account that already has the tax taken care of. Very importantly, if you are a freelance teacher, you are responsible for complying with your local tax regulations, which usually means paying your local government some money. But very often, in a lot of countries, there are particular tax statuses that you need before you can start. So if you are thinking about doing it, it's important to make sure you're in the right situation locally before you start applying, because you might get as far as an interview and somebody will ask you, oh, do you have, for example, and sorry for my Spanish, autonomo status in Spain? And if you don't have it, you might not be able to teach. So important to investigate that if you are thinking about doing it. Now, I think after this webinar, there might be some questions you have to answer. Now, I'm not going to tell you the answers to those questions. However, it might be worth considering the word freelance and the fact that free is at the start of freelance, and that the most important difference of all in terms of you and your teaching, regardless of any money or anything, is your freedom. So you have the freedom over when you teach. You can choose not to teach at all if you want to. You don't have a boss. You are your boss. You also have freedom over the methodology that you use, and very often also the materials that you use. Whereas if you are employed by one particular company or one particular school, they will probably tell you that they want you to use one particular methodology, one particular book. So there's a key difference. I think teachers that enjoy freedom and flexibility, they have their own strong ideas about the methods that they like to use. Perhaps they like making their own materials, are very well suited to teaching freelance. But there are pros and cons. There are advantages and disadvantages to this. So let's have a look at 3 areas where there are particular advantages and disadvantages in freelance teaching. So on the left, we can see 3 features of freelance teaching. 24/7 availability. You do not depend on when the local school or the one organization is open, because if you are an online teacher, you can, if you really want to, choose to teach 24 hours a day. I really don't recommend it, but you can. So what does that mean? If teaching hours are available, you can teach as much as you want, and therefore you can earn more. However, the flip side of that is that for a freelance teacher, a number of hours is never guaranteed. So the default position is typically 0 hours. And I think it's important to view any hours that you do have as being a bonus or a benefit rather than a given or a right. The other thing, and you might want to remember this for the quiz at the end, is if you teach too much, lesson quality will suffer. If you don't give yourself enough time for breaks, for preparation, and even for reflection on your own teaching, which is going to help you develop. Because if you are teaching on your own with a computer and you don't have a director of studies or another other support network, how are you going to develop if you just teach non-stop? You need time for that. So lesson quality will suffer. And that's never good. It's not good for you. It's not good for the student, not good for the organization. So it can be very tempting to open your availability to from midnight to 11:59, Monday to Sunday, and teach as many hours as you can. However, lesson quality should never suffer because you're not doing yourself or the industry justice. And I think ultimately it's not really fair on the students too. The second one we've got is about teaching how you want using your preferred method. That's great. I worked at places where I didn't 100% agree with the method, but I didn't have a choice because it wasn't my school. But I also worked at places where there was no support and I had to do everything. So it's as we say in England, swings and roundabouts sometimes. It's pros and cons. I think it's really nice. You can use the method you like, but it's also great to have support as well. And at the bottom, bespoke materials. Now, I'm sure everybody here, and I'm assuming most people here are English teachers. If you're not, it still applies to any other language. Everybody has taught a course called General English, but I never met a student that wanted a general course. Students want something for them. They want something tailored for them. And so teaching freelance gives you the freedom to do that, to create your own material and make it tailored for the student. However, the disadvantage of that is it takes longer. However, once you've prepared a lesson once, it's yours for life. I'm a firm believer in that. And it doesn't take as long to tailor it a little bit for the next student. However, it's an important consideration because that's uncompensated time. So I think a theme you'll see here is it very much depends on the person. Some people are very much suited to it and really enjoy it. Other people prefer the security and the support that one school offers. So we know what teachers want. Teachers want lots of hours and lots of money and lots of support. But what about companies? What do organizations like EF like? At the top there it says the best ability is. What do you think? What's the best ability? And I'll give you a clue. The answer ends in ility. So the best ability from a company's point of view is availability. We want teachers to be available. If we have a lot of courses, we need teachers to do those courses. So one of the most important things you can offer is your time. Looking after your calendar and making sure it is up to date is really, really important for you, but for the companies as well. It helps companies plan how many teachers they're going to need. If your availability is up to date, and you've got good availability and you can do lots of courses, then maybe the company won't need so many teachers. So that means there'll be more hours for you, which is good, hopefully. Now, when I was doing interviews, there were basically two questions I needed to answer. And those are the other two questions on this slide. So, can you teach and will you teach? Can you, hopefully, is easy to answer, because to be a teacher, hopefully, you have some form of teaching qualification. So whether that is one of the well-known English language teaching qualifications like a CELTA or a Delta, that's easy. If you have one of those, okay, good. So that means you're suitable. The suitability, I've answered that question, that's fine. But the next thing, and this is a real key word. So if I offer you some teaching hours and I say, okay, there's a course and it starts next Monday at 9 o'clock, can I trust that you're going to turn up? Can I trust that your internet is going to work? Can I trust that you can do a good needs analysis with a student? Can I trust that that student is going to be happy and give good feedback? So a super, super important word there is reliability. So if you want the very short version of this presentation, if you want to know about teaching freelance, regardless of all the money and the tax status and all those things, is those three words. The availability you need to have. Be suitable. So it's no good if you're not qualified. And reliability, if you're able to deliver what the company needs, which is please turn up and teach the lesson, and hopefully your internet works, or you turn up to the site where the lesson is taking place, then that's really good. That's what companies want. I think sometimes perhaps teachers think companies just want lots of teachers at a cheap rate, but that's not really true. Quality is important. And quality is one measure of quality is reliability. So you've decided to be a freelance teacher and you've decided you're going to apply to some companies. So how can you ace your application and your interview? So a couple of tips here from me. From, as I said at the start, someone that has read, I don't know, thousands and thousands of CVs and done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of interviews. So remember, you will not be the only person applying. So there will be lots of people applying. How can you make your CV, your resume, stand out? On behalf of me and all recruiters out there, can you put less information on your CV? It's really, you need the relevant information that demonstrates what we saw on the last slide, demonstrate your suitability, demonstrate your reliability, demonstrate your availability. If you write your teaching qualification, the number of years of experience you have, and ideally your location and tax status, that is going to be probably more than enough for the recruiter to make a decision. I used to spend some probably 10 seconds looking at a CV before making a decision. The CVs that make it easier to do that. And maybe if you're on LinkedIn, it's important to have a nice photograph. Photographs on CVs don't help. We're not interested in the photographs. We're interested in the qualification. We're interested in your experience. We're interested in where you are for your time zone and things like that. And we're interested in your tax status. Can you actually teach freelance? So most big companies will use something called an ATS, which is an applicant tracking word for some software that helps with recruitment. If you can make your CV optimized for that system, so it very clearly says if you have a degree, what's your degree? If you have a teaching certificate, what's your teaching certificate? All the dates, the years, that will also make it more likely that the ATS system will recommend your application. So your application will go into a system, and then it will recommend to the person looking at the CVs if it's a good idea to look at it. So I would see that first and then look at the CV, then maybe spend 10 seconds looking at it, and then decide whether it was a good idea to invite the person to interview or not. So to give your application the best chance, spend some time. And it's always interesting to know if you like swimming or reading or making jam in your spare time, but I'll be honest, that doesn't really swing the decision. So that kind of stuff, you don't really need it for something like this. We would need to know qualifications, experience, location, tax status, something like that. Now, I'm sure everybody on this call is as honest as the day is long, but there have been occasions in the past when I have noticed some people, let's say, exaggerate a little bit on their application. And there's a small difference between what people say on their CV and what they say in an interview. I think it's fair to everybody not to waste each other's time. Just be honest. If you have a qualification, say you have it. If you don't have it, don't include it. If you have only 1 year's experience, write that down. It's still worth something. Don't claim to have 10 if you've never done 10. Now, in your interview, there's a good chance you'll be asked a question, something like, tell me about a time when you helped a student, or tell me about a time to give an example. And I've put a link here to a little guide. It's not an EF guide, but a little guide to something called STAR answers, which I think can really help you focus your answer. Keep it nice and short, but give the information that the person doing the interview needs. Each letter stands for a word. The S is for situation. The T is for task. The A is for action. And the R is for result. So it's a way of explaining exactly what you did, so you can show an interviewer your decision-making process. So, for example, here's the situation. I worked in a restaurant. A customer complained that his soup was cold. So my task was to make the customer happy again. My action. First of all, I took my finger and I put it in his soup, and I verified, yes, the soup was cold. I then went to the kitchen and spoke to the chef. I got some hot soup and I gave it to the customer. I didn't put my finger in the hot soup. The result was the customer was happy. That's the kind of thing. So if you can give very clear examples that show your thought process and the actions you took, it can really help the interviewer understand what kind of teacher you're going to be. Now, in your interview, there will be, at some point, probably a question such as, so, what's your hourly rate? Remember, freelance teachers can negotiate their rate. It doesn't mean you can ask for anything you want. I mean, you can ask. It doesn't mean you'll get anything you want, but you can ask. And so there's often a little bit of negotiation. And so just like if you were playing cards, playing poker or something, it's important to know what you've got. So know your worth as a teacher. How much are the rates? How much should you ask for? Now, as an English teacher, obviously, there's a high demand. So that's good. That should be a factor that gets you a higher rate. However, unfortunately, there are other people who are English teachers as well. So there's lots of competition, which obviously is a reason the rates might be slightly lower. And it is unfortunately true, and we've got lots of examples on this call, I guess, that if I'm in England, in London, and I want to be a freelance teacher, there are lots of people in countries that are a little bit cheaper than England. And so it's possible that if I say, well, I need minimum £100 per hour, the interviewer is going to say, well, I have someone in another country with the same qualification as you and the same experience as you who's willing to teach for $10, $20, whatever. So um, it's important not to ask for a number that's too high, but also don't ask for a number that's too low. Remember, you're still a professional. There are other things in your favor. You might know other languages. You might be able to speak Mandarin, and so therefore you could support low-level Chinese learners, for example. You might be in a time zone and you know that company particularly needs teachers in, I don't know, Brazil. You happen to be in Brazil, so that's in your favor. You might have some specific experience, such as business English or particular exams, and that company might particularly need that. So, my real tip, though, on this question, just like if you were playing cards, and imagine you're playing cards, and someone said, oh, what cards have you got? Can I have a look? What would you say? You'll say, no, I'm not showing you my cards. So, when somebody asks you, so how much would you like? What's your hourly rate? Don't answer. Ask them a question. Say, you've seen my CV. You invited me to an interview. I've answered your questions. You've seen my qualification, my experience. I've demonstrated I'm reliable. I think I'm really suitable for this position. How much do you think I'm worth? So now they have to make a decision. Now, if they offer you a number that's too low, they're worried you're going to leave and go and teach for another organization. But if you say your number first, I want, I don't know, $10. They're going to say, this person wants $10. Well, maybe I'll say eight, and then maybe we can compromise on nine. But if you don't say anything and you ask them a question, maybe they say 15. You don't know. So don't say a number that's too low too quickly. Okay. I hope that makes sense. I'm giving away all EF secrets, but important. Um, we shouldn't ask for too much, but it's a professional role, so important to get what you're worth. Now, interesting guide on the rates here. You can follow the link. Not an EF guide, but it's up to date. It's from this year. It gives you an interesting idea of what different organizations pay and what the rates are in different countries if you're thinking about going to teach abroad in another country. Now, touched on this already a little bit, that it's super important not to teach too much. You need to manage your time. If you are teaching with 2 or 3 organizations, you might have 2 or 3 different calendars, different emails coming from different people, all wanting an answer yesterday. You need to make sure you have enough time for the admin, which means answering those emails. Maybe you have to give student feedback, marking, or different organizations do it differently, but you need time outside of the classroom. You also need breaks. If you are teaching online, rest your eyes, get away from the computer screen. Don't teach back to back. Otherwise, you'll be like me by the time you're in your 30s or 40s and can't even see the computer screen properly. So make sure you have breaks for yourself. Make sure you have time to prepare. It's a good way that you can demonstrate your reliability. Start with a small number of courses, show that you can do those well, and when you can do those well, then maybe take some more. A good way to make sure you can do that is to synchronize calendars. So if you have 3 different providers and they have three different systems, three different calendars. I mean, at EF, we have our own calendar, our own system, but you can synchronize it. So if you have a Google Calendar or Outlook, you can synchronize it. So you can see what's on one calendar on the other calendar. It makes life so much easier because otherwise you're continually switching between different systems. That should ensure that you don't miss any lessons. And again, you demonstrate your reliability. If there's a problem, and there will be at some stage, you have to take your hamster to the vet. There's a power cut, there's whatever, something will happen. Um, or there was an issue in a class and you need to tell someone about it. The earlier you can communicate and how clearly you communicate that, so you avoid lots of back and forth, is going to save you time and the organization time. So if you send an email and say, 3 weeks ago, I had a class with Maria. Something happened about the course book. I can't remember. It doesn't really help the company help you. So if you can say the time, the date, the student's full name, any course code that might be involved. If it was a system issue, if you can take a screenshot of the screen and send that, it will help the tech teams fix the issue. So good, early, clear communication can really help. There's two nice EF blogs here written by colleagues of mine. One about managing the emails that you get, the inbox monster, and a very nice one about a kind of work-life balance, a sense of well-being at work that a good colleague of mine wrote. It's well worth a read. They're only short reads, 3-4 minute reads, but well worth clicking on those links and having a look. Now, this is where it gets technical. Have a look at the pictures. Maybe you identify, maybe you know some of these companies, maybe you identify with some of the brands here. Who can we see? We've got a car manufacturer, a sports company, fast food company, the world's best education company, and an online retailer. It's actually the cycling team of the world's best education company. I don't know if you watch the Tour de France, but if you do, you'll see us in the bright pink jerseys. But what do they represent? We all know the logo, but what does it mean? For me, if you go to McDonald's in England and you go to McDonald's in Switzerland and you go to McDonald's in, I think I went to one in China once or Thailand, somewhere. It's kind of always the same. Maybe the menu's a little bit different, but it's kind of the same. The experience is the same. So for me, I would use a word like consistent to describe McDonald's. Then Volkswagen, the car manufacturer, not as exciting as a Ferrari, maybe not quite as good as a Mercedes. In England, they are marketed as reliable. Companies like reliable teachers. Be a Volkswagen teacher. You don't need to be a Ferrari teacher, be a Volkswagen teacher. So if you would like to go to menti.com, you can use your mobile phone and scan the QR code. You can go to menti.com and you can write some words that you think these brands represent. And then I can hopefully share a little word cloud for what you've made. I'll give you 30 seconds or so to have a look. Let's see if we can. There we go. Trustworthy. I like that. Reliability, quality. Clickbait. I hope that wasn't EF. Interesting. So, my next question, and you need to think about this one. There's no Menti, there's no word cloud for this one. These words describe the brands in the pictures that we saw, McDonald's and EF and Volkswagen and Nike. What about you? What word describes your brand as a teacher? If we asked your students, what's your teacher like? What words would they use? What would they say? What would you like them to say? Have a think about that. And then we're going to have a look at personal branding, how to build that brand. Let me share again. So, have we got some ideas about what we would like our brand to be? Probably not a surprise that I would say reliable would be the one I would like my students to say about me. I think a lot of teachers like to be fun, that students enjoy their lessons, and that's great. But I also think that at the end of a course, I would much rather a student thought, wow, Mark was a bit unfriendly, but I learned a lot, rather than Mark was really funny, but I didn't learn anything. I mean, hopefully you can find a balance and a mix, but adding value, I think. Let's have a look about how we can do that. Again, a couple of links you can follow to read into this more. Thinking about what's your USP, what's your unique selling point, what makes you different, what make your lessons good, how do you add value, what do you want your students to remember? Now, I think you can do it in two ways. You can do it outside of the classroom, and you can do it inside of the classroom. Outside of the classroom, your booking, your scheduling, how promptly do you reply to messages, to emails? If you've got too many students, you won't be able to cope with the admin, and your personal brand won't be so popular. If you stay on top of your admin, you schedule your lessons on time, you turn up to your lessons on time, that makes you reliable. So again, this idea of not taking too much, certainly at the start, is key. So one way about thinking about a personal brand is it's a promise and proof. So you say something and you provide evidence of that by actually doing it. So you've probably heard this expression before, promise what you deliver and deliver what you promise. So tell people what you're going to do and then do that. And if there are two things that you do to deliver on that promise, number one, please be punctual, turn up on time. If the lesson starts at 9 o'clock, turn up at 9 o'clock, ideally 1 minute before, but be punctual and be structured. We're lucky that we don't get a lot of complaints here at EF Corporate, but when we do, it tends to be around, there's no structure in my course. I don't really feel progress. So the more structure you can add, talking to your student about the course, about their progress, that can really help. And doing these two things, that will build trust. And when you've got trust, that's half the battle. The first time you turn up on time and deliver that structured lesson, and the student learns something new, there you go. There's your brand. That's what you deliver. The first time you turn up late and deliver a terrible lesson and it's all unstructured, the student won't be happy. And your personal brand is not doing so well. So it was absolute minimum. Turn up on time and add some structure, which means hopefully you've had some time to prepare the lesson in the first place. I hope this makes sense. But in that way, you're really going to project professionalism. It is a professional, it's a professional job. Um, and certainly if you're teaching adults or people from companies, they'll be having other meetings with other people all day long. And you should pitch your lesson at the same level of professionalism. So they shouldn't notice a difference. Oh, I had a good day at work today, but my language class was a bit unprofessional. I don't think any teacher wants to be remembered like that. But what about in the lesson? What can you do? What can you do to add value? So, set objectives. Those objectives ideally should be smart. I hope you know what SMART objectives are. If you don't know what a SMART objective is, there's an amazing new thing called Google, and you can look it up, or you can ask AI. But they are objectives that are specific. They're objectives you can measure. Okay, so not something that says, okay, today's objective is learn English. It ought to be something a bit more. By the end of today's lesson, you will have learned 5 new irregular past simple verbs. You can test that. If they know 4, they haven't met the objective. If they know 6, they've exceeded it. Okay. Key to set objectives for the course, for the lesson, even for an activity. Don't assume the students know what you're doing. Make sure you tell them what's happening. And part of that is by setting an objective. And you do that right from the start. Today, we're going to do this. And by the end of the lesson, you'll be able to do this. Then at the end of the lesson, when they can do the thing you've told them, they've achieved their objective, they're happy. It's an easy way to add structure. Please make sure you have a correction policy. Please don't just have a conversation lesson. Students should learn something new or practice something and get better at something they already knew. Having a correction policy, talking about how you're going to correct people is key. Students will probably say, oh, correct everything. But I think it's a good idea to vary it by activity. So in a fluency activity, perhaps you might correct at the end or make some notes and let them self-correct. In a accuracy activity, maybe you're going to be a little bit stricter and a little bit prompter with the correction. Make sure you give feedback and make sure you ask for feedback. Give feedback about students' progress. Give feedback about their language competency, what they can do. Rather than just focusing on what they can't do, their mistakes, tell them what they can do, what they're doing right. But also ask for feedback about your teaching style. Is it too easy, too difficult, too fast, too slow? Do you like the topics? That will help the student understand that you're listening to them. And that's another thing that's going to help build trust and project your professionalism. Another thing you can do, encourage them to study between the sessions, whether that's setting homework. A lot of companies will have a self-study platform. EF has one of those. If you can direct the students to somewhere where they can help themselves because they might only see you once a week or whatever, I think they will be really grateful for that. Everyone's still awake. I'll take that as a yes. Good. So one other super important thing is to keep your provider, your client happy. So for example, one of our teachers, that would be EF, that would be me. How do you keep Mark happy? So if there is admin, do it on time. I know that admin might seem a pain, but all companies will have probably quite a short window for things like payment. So if they need information from you, such as marking attendance, in order to pay you the right money and the right currency at the right time. We can't wait for 1,000 teachers to do that on the last day of the month. If they ask you to mark attendance at the end of every lesson, mark attendance at the end of every lesson. Again, that will demonstrate your reliability and also make sure you get paid, which is good. Like I said before, if there's an issue, give them all the details. Every time they have to ask you a question is more time for them, but also more time for you when you could be doing something else, teaching another lesson, earning some more money, rather than, oh, I've got to go and find that course code and do a screenshot. Do everything first time, and it will be much faster in the long run. Be upfront about issues. If there are problems, tell someone about it, ask for help. Most organizations will have a teacher support team. The team I work for is a teacher support team. We don't work with clients, we only work with teachers. So we are here to look after teachers. Sometimes they don't tell us about things. When they do tell us about something, maybe they need some time off, whatever, we can help. So telling your support team early about help you need can be really useful in keeping your provider, your client, happy. And last but not least, very importantly, the bottom bullet point there, if you were introduced to a student by a company, so you met the student through the company, do not, and I repeat, do not ever, 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 ever steal that student. That is the ultimate, I think, bad practice from any freelance teacher, saying to a student in a class that was bought by the student from the company, or that student's company decided to buy from another company like EF, and you say to them in the lesson, oh, how much did you pay for this lesson? Oh, $10. Oh, I could do the lesson for $9, Very naughty. Teachers that do that, and it will probably say in your contract that you are not allowed to do that. Teachers that do that, I think, very often find that their collaboration is ended quite quickly. If you met a student yourself through your own marketing, your own research, or you've got a website, or they contacted you on LinkedIn, great, they're yours forever and ever. If you met a student through a company, they belong to the company. And remember, if you're teaching somebody who didn't pay because their company bought the course, you can't do it cheaper because they didn't pay. So the price was already zero for the student. So not a good idea to talk about things like that. That is one way to make your client, your provider, unhappy. So please don't do that. But I'm sure you wouldn't. Now, don't worry, we're nearly finished. One last thing I think to talk about. Here's some examples of where you could find teaching hours. The top one is our website. Tefl.com is always quite a good one, especially if you're thinking of moving abroad to go to another country to teach. LinkedIn is great. I put a link to an article about using Boolean search. I don't know if you know how to do that. It's very simple. It's just a way to refine searches. It uses 4 words. One of them is and. So you just go to your search engine, and if you want teaching jobs in London, you would put teaching jobs and in capital letters and then London, and that will show you results that are teaching jobs in London. If you, for example, don't want teaching jobs in, I don't know, Paris, you just write teaching jobs not in capital letters, Paris. Well worth having a look. It can make searching much, 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 much easier if you've never heard of that before. So, last but not least, why am I sitting next to a window? Hopefully, I'm a bit more like the lady on the left than the lady on the right. And if you bear with me 1 second, let me give you an example. If you are next to a window and the light is coming onto your face, natural light is much, much clearer, much, much better, much, much nicer for online teaching. If you're in the same position, but you then just move you then suddenly have a shadow on your face, or if you could turn all the way around, you suddenly have bright light behind you and your face is dark. So always, always, always set yourself up wherever possible next to a window with the light coming onto your face. So I've got no extra lighting here apart from some lights in the room. It's just the natural light coming onto your face. Makes it so much easier for a student to see your mouth so they can hear what you're saying, see what you're saying at the same time. Super top tip. Always, always, always teach next to a window. If you look at the two pictures we've got here, you might notice a couple of other things that the teacher on the right could improve. The lighting. Please put your children in another room. We don't really need to see your cat. Gorgeous as it is, I'm sure it doesn't really need to appear in the lesson. So quiet, well-lit locations. Husbands, wives, pets, kids, whatever you've got, anything that makes a noise in another room is a good idea. And get yourself some good equipment, decent internet, nice laptop, microphone, headphones, whatever. Again, a link to an EF guide that has information about those things, but also information about, make sure you're sitting up straight, make sure you're resting your eyes. Because if you're going to teach online for a considerable amount of time, you need to look after yourself. Okay, we're nearly there. Don't worry. So, to summarize, there are good bits and bad bits about freelance teaching. Lot of flexibility, lot of freedom, but not necessarily guarantees. Do your best to create a personal brand based on reliability. To do that, update your availability, keep your calendars synced, manage your time, don't teach too much. If you do all those things, you are going to create a brand based on trust, and your students will love that. They will stay with you. You will get more students, and everybody will be happy. That was a very brief and very fast and hopefully not too boring overview of being a freelance teacher. I hope some of it was useful. If you have questions, comments, feedback that you would like to send to me directly, you're very welcome to find me on LinkedIn and ask me anything you want. Just to point out, the fact that you know me or connect with me on LinkedIn is not a guarantee of teaching hours at EF. It's probably better if you write on your application that you came to this webinar than I know Mark, but you're very, very welcome to connect with me. It would be great to hear from you. So that is kind of it from me. I think my colleagues will have got a couple of things they would like to say too.
Yes. Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much. And actually, picking up what you just said about career EF, there are so many ways that teachers can take to collaborate with EF. You can test your student English for free with the EF set, where they will get an official certificate, and the school will also receive a detailed report, and it's benchmark on the CFR parameters. You can also bring your classroom outside into the world and lead them with an EF language trip and inspire your students through and cultural immersion. And finally, you can boost your teaching skills with EF teacher trainings, free school visit, and ready-to-use class materials. And if we move to the next slide, we would like actually to know more from you. We are conducting a survey to improve our platforms for teachers. If you can use 10, 15 minutes of your time to fill in the survey that I'm about to share in the chat, we will really appreciate your feedback to improve our offer to teachers. Mark, can you move to the next slide, please? Thank you. We're trying to really build a platform that helps you. And now, before sharing the quiz for the webinar 3 in the chat, you can go to the next slide, Mark. This webinar is being recorded and it will be shared with you tomorrow by email along with the quiz. If you have any request or question, you can always send us an email to teacher.zone@ef.com. And now I'm sharing the link in the chat to the quiz for today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining. I will see you next Wednesday. You will learn more about speaking and presentation skills. I will leave the chat and the webinar open for you to click on the link. Thank you again, Mark, for this amazing session, and I'll see all of you next week. Bye.
Cheers now. Bye bye.